Hello, Dr. Kurt's class. My name is Kevin Helenen. I am in mechanical engineering. Um, Wanted to share with you folks about a project my students have been working on this semester that they're just wrapping up. And it has relevance to what you folks do. So we wanted to kind of share our story, and I'm going to share my screen. So we were working with Montgomery County Educational Services Group. It's it provides services to schools in the Miami Valley area, and we were provided anonymized data on individual 5-year-old students participating in kindergarten in 3 different school districts, or 4 different: Trotwood Madison, Mad River, Kettering, and Dayton Public Schools. And one of our goals was to leverage data that I'm going to describe shortly to you to draw conclusions about what where priorities should be for trying to raise the outcomes, the performance of students in the classroom. What kind of teacher is best suited to improve students, and particularly improve students with specific demographics. So my class took this data set, um, roughly about 1,200 kids, and could just go on and on, but you can just see a lot of features here. Um, and we're really trying to develop some models and draw conclusions from these. So again, this data was provided to us, uh, and our goal actually is to help uh, develop new processes for analyzing this data to help the school system. Before my students present the results, I wanted to share more specifically the data that we had. So first off, we had student demographics, um, black, white, gender, um, uh, they stay in the same residence during a school year. They participate in a star attendance program whereby their parents get paid $25 a month, more or less, if the kids come to school over 90% of the time, whether they were half day or full day, etc. We also had individual demographics on the parents in terms of education, household income, and racial demographics, where the students live, the census block, uh, including a lot of economic information, also housing information, for example, uh, the how many vacant units and the percentage of vacant units in their community. For each of the students, we had a knowledge of which school system they were going to, uh, whether the program was Head Start or not, public provider, private provider, and what the capacity was. Also, the school's owner and director of racial demographics. We had information on the specific classrooms, but we ignored those. The classroom, if we're developing a model, the classroom is signature for the teacher. So one teacher may be incredible and have an impact on student outcomes and performance, and that's all good to know. But what we were seeking instead were proxies that represented the teacher, and yet there still are some demographics associated with the teachers that are important. Have they been around? Um, Actually, there's another class code that was ignored. What kind of education did the lead teacher or the assistant teacher have? What was the race? Did they participate in different coaching options where either aligned with a coach? This was actually in Dayton public schools only, they're aligned with the coach for the whole year, ideally, being mentored and further developed as they did that. Or did they participate in one or more training activities over the course of the year? The hope would be that had they, the teacher participated, the student's teacher participated in these, that could have improved attendance or job performance. And we were really seeking proxies for the teacher. What kind of teacher was it? And so we had actually, there's something called a class test or evaluation of teachers. And there are a lot of different categories. ES, it turns out to be an important one. That's educational support. CO corresponds to class organization. Um, and sorry, ES is empathetic support. IS is instructional support. Those were really important. And there were measures of the teacher by outside evaluators in these categories. And we wanted to just see if those had impact. Finally, we also, by the way, with respect to students, had their attendance rate over the school year. That's really important. And then finally, we had student outcomes both in the fall. Think of this as the baseline test prior to starting school, and in the spring. And theoretically, this is evidence, a change in the score or the performance from fall to the spring, positive or negative, potentially can assess the effectiveness of the teacher relative to that particular student. So in any event, my students developed models. Generally, they were trying to predict some of these outcomes or the attendance rate as a function of these data features. And fundamentally, the models were used to ask questions. What if the attendance rate improved? What if the parents had a job? All of the parents had a job. What if every student was Black? What if the teacher had a high empathy score, ES score, or class organization score, or instructional support score? What impact does that have on student outcome? And on and on. And not only what impact does it have overall on average, but who did it have an impact on? And that's as much why we're doing what we're doing. We wanted to be able to not only say on average, there could be this kind of shift among the entire student population. We'd also like to say this would be the shift for the demographic of students that were Black and poor, for example. That's the setup for what you're going to see next. Hope you enjoy. Really, really hope that you can give us feedback on your perceptions of what you're seeing with this. And hope you learned something about what we, as engineers and technologists, do. Thanks.
And then let's present it, or that's from view, I think. There we go.
You may say who you are as well. I probably didn't ask you that.
Okay. Like just say our names.
Yeah, why don't you all three say it? Like, I'm Joe, I'm Abdullah, I'm Andrew, right?
Close, yep. So I'm Paul.
Oh, gosh.
Very close.
Oh.
But yeah, we can start right now. So
Yeah.
I'll say my name first, and everyone else say after. Then Andrew, you take it over.
Alright.
So I'm Paul Mossing.
And I am Abdullah Garib.
And I am Andrew Killian. So our project focused on the STAR attendance program in Dayton Public Schools. We decided to zero in on DPS because they had the largest problems with attendance. So we were hoping to see if we could find out if this STAR attendance program initiative is actually having a large effect on attendance and whether or not they should expand it or focus on other things. And what we found out from running what if analyses on it with various different models was that STAR attendance really does not, or like being in the STAR attendance program really does not have that much of an effect on students' attendance rates. So you can see the original data, the measured attendance rate was 89.73%. We have two separate models predicting what would happen if all of the students were in STAR attendance program. And there were not significant increases with all the students in the program. And then we investigated certain groups of students based on ethnicity or employment or poverty, for example, and there were no correlations. So it's pretty general for all the students. There isn't really that much of a connection. And then we ran a what if analysis for what if we just got rid of the program. So what if no students were in the STAR attendance program? And that actually reported a slight increase in average attendance rate, but still very small and generally insignificant. So from looking at this data, our recommendation would just be to discontinue the STAR attendance program and put energy and resources somewhere else.
So you're saying that bribing children to come to school isn't really effective?
Yeah, because at least when we looked into what the STAR attendance program is, it looks like it's bribing preschool students' parents with
Yeah.
$25. So that doesn't seem to be doing it.
No, thank you. Beautiful.
Yep, thank you.
All right. Hi, my name is Kara Rasmussen, and I worked with
Katie Workner.
and we looked at how teacher trainings impact the student attendance rate, and we tried to find what students would benefit the most from additional teacher trainings.
So what we found overall was that increasing teacher trainings, no matter if they were trainings that focused on making school a more welcoming place or focusing on those children that were absent, or even the most attended trainings by teachers, increasing those tended to decrease student attendance rate instead of increasing students attendance rate like we had hoped. And this kind of leads to the conclusion that teachers may be better off spending more time just working with their classes and giving students attention in those classes than doing more of these teacher trainings.
There were students that had an increased had an increased attendance rate due to the teacher trainings, and those students were mostly African American students in the Dayton public school system who had low household incomes and their parents were employed full-time. So those students would benefit, but other than that, most students did not benefit from additional teacher training.
Okay, so like other teams, our team explored the effect of the STAR attendance program in general, but unlike other teams, we looked at the impact of the STAR attendance program on educational outcomes for the student. Specifically, we targeted the MEE MEFS test scores and looked at the effect of putting all students in the STAR attendance program for both semesters and to see what effect that would have. And so as you can see, we've had kind of a mixed bag in terms of student performance based on participation in the STAR attendance program. But Alex can go a little bit more into that.
Yeah, so we definitely did have kind of a mixed bag. On average, we found that participation didn't really amount to much for most of the students. It was roughly a 50-50 split. Some students more positive, some students more negative. And we broke it down by ethnicity, parents' income, teacher performance, and throughout all of them, we couldn't find any significant trends to tell us that the STAR attendance program had much effect on students.
In general, I mean, as other groups have said, it's a preschool program that incentivizes parents more than it does students. So it might be more beneficial to implement this at higher levels of education, but at least at a preschool level, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense as per this data. So.
All right, so my name is Ryan Rush.
I'm Nick Rhodes.
And so the goal for us looking at the school data is we wanted to look at how the students in the Miami Valley, how their attendance rates would be affected if their parents combined were both full-time employees and they made over $50,000 a year. So initially we analyzed the data was given to us, and we found that the current average attendance rate was about 89%. After we ran our conclusions and manipulated the data to represent the parents making over $50,000 a year and them both being full-time, this actually increased our data to 91%. And so what we saw through this was actually, while some students did have a big increase in their attendance rates, there was also some students that decreased their attendance rates. But overall, the main change was a positive increase. So by parents being raised in a household where they can maybe look up to their parents having jobs, having more successful roles, it helps increase their attendance rate and them wanting to go to school.
Yeah, and one interesting thing that kind of is in the first bullet point of, we saw 322 kids have a 10% increase in their attendance rate when the two numbers were adjusted. And to clarify the data a little bit more, we had at least, so the income was raised to at least 50,000. So if they were already making over 50,000, those numbers stayed the same. It was just any number income under 50,000 was adjusted to 50,000. And then of course, all parents were employed full-time. And a lot of the numbers changed. I think our biggest increase was like 85 to 90%. So we did see a lot of increase in a lot of the data, but as Ryan's saying, it kind of did balance off with some negative. That's why it's only a 2% increase, but definitely a strong correlation between the two variables and then our prediction.
Just to add to that, LeBron James program in Akron actually not only provides after-school tutoring and help, but jobs for all the parents. And it has
I Promise School. Yeah.
I Promise, and it has had impact.
Okay, so I'm Claire Frankowski.
And I'm Catherine Jr.
For us, we wanted to determine how increases in income, education level, and employment level of the parents had an impact on attendance across the Dayton area schools.
So the way that we did it is, for our what ifs and everything, we had 3 different cases. And in all these cases, we increased the income, education, and employment levels together because they're all very heavily correlated. For example, if you have a good education, chances are you're going to have a better job, and that'll get you more money. So for the first case, we increased everything. We increased it so everybody had a minimum income of at least $25,000, a minimum education of at least a high school or GED, and then a minimum employment of part-time, and then some people were in school. And then the second case, we increased to 42,000 with an associate's degree, and then full-time and in school. And then for our last case, everyone had a minimum income of at least $60,000, a bachelor's degree, and every parent was full-time.
So the graph shows the different average attendance levels. So the leftmost bar was just the original data set. The average attendance was 89.3%. And then for case 1, we saw that the average attendance increased to 89.8%. And then for case 2, it increased to 90.7%. And then finally for case 3, it was at 90.8%. So in conclusion, we found that increasing income, employment, and education for parents increased the overall average attendance for all the students. And we saw that there was the largest change between case 1 and 2. So that 25,000 to 42 all the way, then changing to 42 to $60,000. And then there was a very, very small difference between case 2 and case 3.
Try that again.
All right, round 2. Okay, I'm Greg Lawler.
I'm Emma O'Leary.
So our project was quantifying opportunities to improve education of young people in Miami Valley. The goal of this project was to use machine learning to see what aspects would have the highest effect on increasing student attendance and score. So how we achieve the goal is by doing 2 separate studies. One was to see if attendance would increase standard score, and the other was what if all parents were employed, and to see if that would increase student attendance.
Okay, so overall, we had a small trend line upward for higher attendance, indicating higher standard scores. For those of you that don't understand the graph, the relative importance shown at the bottom is how much effect that the independent variable has on the dependent variable. So you can see there's about an 81% importance on that. That means it's very important. Usually we don't see that with a ton of them. And the trend line going upward, once again, shows that higher attendance indicates higher standard scores, which means increasing attendance would increase standard scores district-wide, which would eventually lead to probably more funding for the schools, better teaching, and it would just continue to trend upward. So as far as improving attendance, we ran a study to see what would happen if every parent in the district was employed. And overall, across all Miami Valley schools, there was a predicted negative change in attendance, implying that most of them would decrease in attendance. We did have some increase in about 200 to 250 students increased attendance overall. But when you look at specifically the families that would have gained employment, the change in attendance just went way up. You had a significant increase overall. That's what these 2 graphs are, is increase versus decrease. That's why it's positive or negative. We just decided to graph it that way because we felt it was more digestible. And then if you look specifically in DPS, there's also significant improvement among families who would have gained employment that are not currently employed in the attendance of their students. And like I said, higher attendance equals higher standard scores, which equals more money for the district, which means better teachers, better programs, and just overall improvement.
So the finding for this was there was a predicted increase in parents being employed. A factor we hadn't considered when doing the what if was if parents are working, can't take their kids to school. And but the families who gained employment, their attendance, the students' attendance was expected to improve both in DPS and Miami Valley.
A student here at UD.
I'm Caroline Ellis, and I'm also a senior mechanical engineering student. And so our team wanted to understand student standardized testing scores. So we determined which variables had a large impact on those standardized testing scores, which we focused on attendance rate, teacher average assessment, and teacher encouragement. And then we modeled how those standardized scores changed after we positively affected each of those variables. So we made them have almost perfect attendance, et cetera. And then we analyzed the effect that this had on different student demographics, mostly ethnicity and school district.
So these 3 graphs were created from positively affecting the variables. We wanted to see what would happen. So you can see in each of them the changes in the student scores versus the number of students. So for example, improving student attendance rate changed student testing scores mostly towards the positive. So you can see 0 to 1 numerical change. They had 181 students. And the same thing for the average assessment score and the encouragement scores. They both went up. And in conclusion, each of our predictions increased the student standard testing scores overall. And then the factors that had the greatest positive impact were African American students from the Dayton School District.
Hey, well done. Well done study too. I really like that you focused your questions not on your kind of initial thoughts, but on what you were seeing from a variable importance standpoint. So great job. Great presentation.
Hello, my name is Nathan Kolonsky, and
I'm Luke Conacher.
And so what we wanted to see was what the most important factor was in affecting student outcome with low-income families. And the reason why we wanted to see this is because there's just over 50% of the parents in this data set that are actually in the lowest category of income.
Yeah, so after we predicted the model, we took all these families with low income and we tried to see that variable importance. And in conclusion, we actually came up with that the teacher ethnicity of the assistant like teacher was actually very important to the success of student outcome. And I mean, this makes sense just because in those lower like income housings, just having like that one-on-one interactions with the assistant teacher, if it looks like the ethnicity demographics could have a really big impact on that, which in conclusion, which was predicted by our model as well.
Good. Take care, guys. Enjoy the weather. Adios.
Cool. Thank you, Kevin.